Hello and welcome to another episode of Hope and the City. My name is Rob.
And my name's Emma.
Today we're looking at a subject, a pregnancy crisis, touching on many aspects of that which can be incredibly difficult, incredibly personal. Stories that many of us have, some that we might have shared and other people known, some we've kept to ourselves for many years.
Yeah. So Jane and Sarah come and join us here in the studio talking about the work that they do at the charity Pregnancy Crisis Care, which is has an office in the centre of Plymouth. And they talk about how they support people through baby loss, miscarriage, any kind of crisis related to pregnancy. We really hope that you find this episode useful and helpful and that it offers you some hope.
Hello and welcome to what is now season 2 of our podcast Hope and the City. My name is Rob and this is Emma.
Hiya, we're so pleased to have you back joining us again for this next series. So today in the studio, we've got some exciting guests with us. We're really pleased to have Jane and Sarah here from Pregnancy Crisis Care. So I've known both of these, they're good friends of mine for a number of years, but this is the first time that you've met.
Yes, I've never met these two and I don't actually know what you do, although I'm really interested and I'm glad we're taking on this subject today. So welcome. Both of you.
Thank you.
We've got some questions for you.
Okay.
Me, probably more than Emma to start with. So sort of, who are you and what do you do?
Okay, shall I go first? Yes. So, my name is Sarah and Jane. I work closely with Jane. Jane is the centre manager and we are a local charity based in the city centre and we offer free confidential counselling to any pregnancy-related crisis. So that can be to individuals, couples, men and women. And it includes things like miscarriage, stillbirth, unplanned pregnancy, people who may be struggling after having a termination, fertility issues, ectopic pregnancy. And then sometimes when people get pregnant after they've had a loss, we will then give them pregnancy support as well. And it can be a recent loss or a historic loss. There's no kind of time, whatever the word is on that. Yeah. Did I include everything? I think I did.
I think you did, yeah. We see people from age 13 upwards, and our oldest client has been about 70.
As in, sorry, did you say 70?
70, yeah.
Oh, wow. That's really broad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that like in a grandparent maybe capacity?
There have been grandparents, but also a lady who had had a previous pregnancy loss many, many years before, but never talked about it.
Wow. So you see people singularly, you see people as couples?
Yeah.
Men on their own, women on their own?
Yeah, individually and as a couple, yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So how do people hear about you? How do people know that you're there?
Well, we have good links with all the hospitals and the perinatal mental health service and doctor's surgery. So lots of people refer people to us, sometimes from the university or Marjons as well. Some schools, although not so many schools, but yeah, education sometimes. But largely a lot of places within the city and the health service.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So why did it start and how did it start? I mean, it's not something that, perhaps it's because I'm a guy, I'm not aware that these services, are they a common service? Are we just particularly blessed in Plymouth to have something like this set up?
There are different services around the country. I had a personal sort of encounter in terms of a vision when I was working for The Zone actually a few years ago, and I had a job as a teenage pregnancy outreach worker for under 18s, and that job entailed meeting them and then working through what their options were, what they felt about them. And as part of that role, I had to spend a morning up at the termination clinic, and I sat with a consultant through the whole morning, and there were some women there that were okay with what they were doing, and there were some women there who were very, very distressed. And what the consultant said to me then was that she hoped that there were people that they had been able to talk to before they came to the hospital, because basically she was just doing the consent and doing the scans and things. Mm-hmm. So it was very evident to me then that some people hadn't had places to talk about these things with. And the role at The Zone sadly ended because the funding ended. Okay. And I felt like, could we do something in the city for women of all ages, not just under 18s, who find themselves with a pregnancy-related crisis or a loss? And at that time in the city, back in 2005, there was very, very limited support. I went to a conference up in Glasgow, and it was called Impact Your World, and I was just so impacted by it, and I just felt like, could we do something like this in the city down in Plymouth? And then through a friend of a friend, I met a lady who had a very similar vision, and we started training and prepping and planning and getting a room ready, etc. And we were able to set up the centre and opened it in 2008.
That's incredible. So that's almost 20 years, coming up 20 years.
16 years we've been running, yeah.
That's
But yeah.
amazing. And what a difference you will have made, like in that time, to the people who've used your service as well. Because how many people would you say you see on average in a year?
It's probably about 200 plus, isn't it?
Yeah.
But to give you kind of an indication of how it's grown, so when we first started in 2008, we saw 35 clients, and then in 2023 we saw 221 clients. So it's obviously grown massively over the years.
And is that awareness of your organisation, and is there also a factor that people are now beginning to talk more about things that perhaps they hadn't talked about before?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you see any shifts?
Yeah, I do believe that this sort of subject area is becoming more and more on people's radars. There's been a lot of stuff in the newspapers about pregnancy loss and miscarriage, and I think the hospitals are much more aware. And there's a bereavement pathway that's been produced to ensure that there's good care in the hospitals for pregnancy-related loss, which wasn't there before. So I think it's gradually built up over the time of awareness in the city.
Yeah. And there's also, I don't know if you're aware, there's a Baby Loss Awareness Week, which runs nationally every year. We've just had that in October. So that's become more and more of a thing. And it's all about raising awareness and, enabling people to talk and come together and support each other. So that was quite a big thing in the city this year.
I saw the Theatre Royal all lit up.
Yeah.
And I think, did they do Smeaton's Tower this year?
Smeaton's Tower, Theatre Royal, Crown Plaza,
The box,
the Duke of Cornwall. We're trying to get as many buildings as we can, and the hospital as well, obviously.
Just amazing that so many people are like joining in with this raising awareness, isn't it? Because the more people that are aware, the more conversations that will be had, the more people that will hear about help that they need to have. Yeah. So somebody contacts the pregnancy crisis care, and they come in and they have an appointment. So what kind of things would people do with you? Is it one-to-one like talking therapy, or is it like groups, coffees? Is it online? Is it in person? What kind of...
So it's a whole mixture really, isn't it? So when people first contact, we do have a bit of a waiting list, which we hate having, but it's kind of the only way to manage things. But actually it's relatively short probably compared to most places. And they'll come in for an initial assessment, mainly face-to-face, and then as soon as we've done that, we will allocate them to a counsellor. And they can have up to 20 to 24 sessions. And, sometimes people take up all of those sessions, sometimes not. But actually, sometimes if they want a bit longer, like sometimes with people struggling with fertility issues, we're very flexible, I think, really, aren't we, in what we offer. We do have a group running as well, don't we? That's a bit more limited.
We do a baby loss group, support group, but it's very limited and people aren't accessing it so well. So we may have to review that for the new year.
So I guess you've mentioned some of the issues there, and miscarriage is one I'm thinking of first. And so they're all different, and people are processing them different ways. I guess in my mind, one of the immediate particular challenges pertaining to miscarriages is that there's a real tendency, well, I guess perhaps like all of these things, but to feel very alone, because actually it's for many other people around you, it's not as visible, is it? So you're going through such a thing, or have been through such a thing, or are fearful of such a thing that perhaps many people don't know. I guess that's one of the challenges. What are some of the others?
Yeah, loneliness is very common because it's a hidden topic. People don't talk about it, although it is starting to be talked about more. But yeah, it's very isolating. It's a hidden grief because there's not if it's a later miscarriage, obviously they give birth to that little one. But when it's an early miscarriage, maybe nobody's been told, so that's a hidden grief. Nobody knows about it. They can feel very, very suicidal, some people. It can be very traumatic depending on what they've been through, even for an early miscarriage. So, often people we see have PTSD to some degree. severe anxiety, severe depression, sometimes feeling suicidal. So, yeah, it is one-to-one counselling. We talk through all those issues with them and help them to process all those emotions around all those feelings.
I think sometimes as well, even when people have got that support network, which is obviously really, really important, then there becomes a certain time when they think they shouldn't be talking about it anymore, or they're worried about saying the same thing. They're worried about the impact that their grief has on other members of the family. So I think coming to counselling, obviously, they don't have to worry about that. It's their safe space just to be who they need to be. Yeah.
So if, I've come across friends and things in the past, I've got children of my own, and so therefore I've got friends who are in that age group where we're, having children or have had children. And I've had friends that have suffered miscarriage, or baby's been very sick, or there's been stillbirth. And even now I feel really inexperienced when I chat to people, and you just don't know the right thing to say to people. What would some of the things that you would say are helpful? I mean, I know it's a bit of a case-by-case scenario, and often like words of encouragement and words of support would come out of relationship. We've talked about that in series 1, haven't we?
Yeah,
the
we have a lot.
importance of relationship. But are there kind of some things that you might find that are helpful? What things, is it practical help that people want? Is it just, go on, I'll leave it,
Yeah.
leave it to you guys to
Yeah, I guess, practical help's always good, isn't it? Probably in those initial days. And I think, but more than anything, not shying away from asking people and talking to them, because people want to be heard and they want to be acknowledged. And I think, it's not about trying to make it better or take that pain away. It's just giving them the space to feel how they're feeling, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think it's important as well just to be able to let them cry. Some people say, we've seen people that have had really unfortunate experiences, even with friends and family, who've said, it's been 3 months now, you must be over this by now, you can get pregnant again, there's all these things are very, very unhelpful. So just being with people and understanding that they're still grieving, even if it's 3 or 4 or 6 or 12 months later, because those anniversary dates come up and they're really, really significant for people. So just being sensitive to people and asking them how they're really doing, and if they want to cry, they can cry. Just don't try and shut them up.
Yeah.
And do you find that that men get lost in this conversation a bit in society, and how do you work to make that a better thing? Do you work with couples together, for example, and do you have men that just come on their own?
Yeah, we do. We see men on their own, and we see men with a couple. Men and women often grieve in different ways. So we don't do relationship counselling, but we do see people to help them understand their own grief, but also to help them to understand each other's grief.
Right, okay.
Because men often maybe like to go and dig in the garden or go for a pint down the pub with their mates. And they process their grief in a very different way to women. So more practical, they keep it to themselves. Maybe they don't want to cry. Maybe they don't want to ask their partner how they are, because that might make them cry, and they don't want their partner to cry, so they won't say a word. And then the woman sometimes can get upset with that, and understandably feels like they don't understand her grief. So sometimes our work is helping them to understand their own personal ways of grieving, but also understanding each other, so then they can support each other in that.
One of the things I remember after James, actually, so Jane and Sarah both knew James also, and is that Carl and I grieved in very different ways. And one of the things we did tend to do is we felt like at times we couldn't upset the other one. So like Carl would be having an emotional day and I would feel okay, and so he wouldn't want to bring me down, and then vice versa. But in the grieving sense, like dates stick in my mind. Carl is less, as a man, I don't know if that's a man thing generally. I don't know what you're like with dates, Rob, but like dates are really significant to me, and I remember things and I build up towards dates, and not just the obvious ones, like when it was James's birthday or when he passed away, but it might be a time when we went on holiday together, or a special memory that we have together, and I would remember those, and Carl, like bless him, wouldn't remember those things. So I would have a day of feeling emotional and it just wouldn't be on Carl's radar. And it's where you meet in the middle with those, isn't it, I guess, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah, so...
I think that the plus side as well, a bit more, like what Jane said about having a couple in the room together, is when you've built that relationship with them, they kind of feel safe to say things in that room to each other, which they maybe wouldn't make the time or say that outside of the session. So you really kind of see them grow and develop, don't you, and understand each other. Yeah.
So just thinking about maybe one or two cases, obviously confidentiality, we don't want to breach any confidentiality. Are there some sort of stories that you would be happy to share with us, maybe, where people have given you permission to share, where they've come to the centre like in quite a broken place and then found hope? After all, this is what our podcast is aiming towards, to giving people hope, where they found hope and have gone on to continue living life after tragedy.
Yeah, we were going to share a story about a couple actually called Brad and Justine. And I think, did you see them?
I did used to see Brad and Justine, and their story is on our website. We've got video stories if anybody wants to look at those. Yeah. And so, they very bravely shared their story. I'll just read out this if that's all right, because it's easier to. So, Brad and Justine came to counselling after they lost their daughter, Sienna, at 35 weeks in 2019. It was a very traumatic birth, which lasted 3 days. But they recalled within the sessions how they got to see her and how she was beautiful. And then when they had to leave, they were just left with that feeling of, how do we move forward after this? Justine just wanted someone to tell her what to do. When they first came to the centre, where it was just very gentle and calming in her words, she said it felt like a big proverbial hug. Justine and Brad came as a couple to sessions and described how it just opened up those conversations in a safe and neutral space so they could understand each other. Brad described it as being on rough seas and feeling like he was not going to make it. And Justine describes how she learnt that grief was not linear. It was very messy and chaotic, and that was okay. There was no right or wrong way to feel. You were very normal for the feeling. They were very normal for the way they were feeling. They described that they were able to be raw and vulnerable in the place, and it felt like a weight was being lifted off them. And they shared that without our care at Pregnancy Crisis Care, they would not be where they are now, and not as strong as a couple. She said that it was not but both and, so that they can both be devastated and heartbroken for what had happened, but also grateful for the life she had now. There's more on their video, and they have had another baby since then. Yeah. So, it's quite a moving story. But there's lots of stories on our website if you want to listen to them.
That would be lovely. That would be really good. Really lovely. Oh, so I guess you guys and the other people that are working at the centre there, they must hear some really heavy and difficult things. So perhaps on a personal level, how do you guys manage hearing those things? And I know because you're professional counsellors, you have like supervision and such like, but still it touches your heart, doesn't it? You couldn't not be affected by people's lives and helping them, really.
Yeah, I mean, it is really, really moving. And I think, when you're doing, long-term counselling with people and you kind of go on that journey with them, it can feel really emotional. And like you were saying, we have regular supervision, so it's almost like our own kind of mini counselling session where we can talk through cases. And, you couldn't do the job if you didn't do that. But I think, it's also about looking after ourselves, isn't it? And just making sure we have time to relax after sessions. Yeah. And just being there for each other, really, and having that space to talk things through. Yeah.
That's fabulous.
Do you find that people share with you things that they are doing sort of outside as well as coming to meet you guys? And from hearing their stories and their testimonies and seeing those people recover from their most sort of traumatized or heavy places, are there any particular sort of themes in people that you've noticed who are sort of how they're living their life as such?
I think in the early stages of loss and grief, especially losing a child, it's really, really complicated grief. So it's hidden grief, as I said before. Even with a stillbirth, people don't know what to say, what to do. So they'll often want to be at home in their safe place. They won't want to enter out to the world. Anywhere they go is triggering. If they go to a shop, there's a baby. If they go downtown, there's baby clothes shops and things. So there's just
things on social media.
Yeah, so they really kind of isolate and shut themselves down. So it's very brave of them to even come to sessions sometimes because they just don't want to leave the house. So there's that isolation. But it's so complicated because it's not just that they've lost a child, it's like they've lost the future. and that's not often understood. So it's like, how do we live life again? It's like, how do we find a new normal? This is awful. But what we find in coming to the sessions, they gradually start to open up and process all that stuff. And they are able to go out again. They are able to go to the shops again. They gradually can start reintegrating into life and getting back to work or college or whatever. They do other things as well, in terms of we might encourage them to do self-care things, fun things, gentle exercise when they're ready. But it can take a time for some people. It's a long, slow process, and it just takes many months of recovery, really.
So when you say that they've lost a future or they're grieving a future, so are you saying, this is me trying to understand it, so if you lose somebody later in life, then there's the loss of what you've had, but losing a child, or particularly a child that you never actually got to meet in the flesh, is losing all those hopes and dreams and what you envision you'd be doing at certain stages of life.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because I think often when people see that positive pregnancy test, even without realising they're making those plans and, maybe kind of envisaging what their family's going to be like, maybe it's a sibling for a child they've already got. So all of that is all of a sudden gone, so it's a loss, like you say, it's a loss of all of that as well, isn't it?
And have you seen how different families have shared with siblings and their other children, for example, what they've been through? I'm sure it's down to each individual to make those decisions, but is that something that you talk about in your sessions? Yes. Who you tell, who you bring into this journey you've been on?
Yeah, there was a lovely story actually with, when you see people kind of move through it and come out the other side. Obviously, life is, they, like you were saying, find that new normal, but sometimes they will go on and do some like a fundraising event. And I'm thinking of a particular couple who Emma will remember, Tim and Rosie, and their story is on our website. And they had a late loss of their daughter, and they came for a couple, sessions together as a couple. And then he decided he wanted to do something to give back. So he did a cycle ride from London to Paris, and he incorporated his family in that. So they were at Paris, and his other daughter with all their T-shirts on, ready to kind of meet him. And I think I'm right in saying they raised about £5,000, didn't they?
Yeah. That's quite
and he now actually is a trustee as well. So that was a really kind of lovely story of seeing, how someone changes and moves through that and, comes out the other side.
Yeah. And just able to do something, I guess, for him. Like I can only relate to it in terms of my own experience. We're all really different, aren't we? But sometimes when we do something that's positive for other people, that's like our tribute to the person that we've said goodbye to. And I suppose perhaps for him, that's his way of honouring the child that he didn't get to see grow up.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is just, just beautiful.
Yeah.
Really beautiful.
Something with pregnancies as well is, I think, trying to think back to when Anna, who was our first, am I right in saying that there's a sort of unwritten rule that you don't tell anyone you're pregnant until 13 weeks or something like that? Have we just made that up in society? Is that helpful? What's some of your reflections on that?
Yeah, people do tend to keep it a bit quiet because they have the 12-week scan.
Right.
And at the 12-week scan, that will say whether there's a heartbeat or not. Right. Sometimes people have a missed miscarriage, so they don't even know they've lost a baby by then. And that can be a big shock. So people tend to wait until a little bit later to tell. But then that carries an issue, because if they haven't told anybody and then they have had a loss, then who do they tell? Because they're stuck with their grief then.
So it's not necessarily helpful at all, I don't think.
No.
So your recommendation would be, at least a couple of close friends, keep them in the loop.
Yeah, obviously everyone's individual, aren't they? But I think, if you have already shared that with someone, if something, does happen, then at least you've got that support network straight away.
And how many of the people who come to see you have told very few people before they've come to you? And how many have tried to process this just with friends and family and just found that actually there was still stuff they needed to work through?
I'd say there's quite a few people that don't say hardly anything to anybody. It's a very private thing, and they just shut up with it on their own and isolate. So there's quite often nobody's said anything to anybody, have they?
Yeah.
Don't know how many percentage that is, but quite a lot of people.
It'd be interesting to know. But
I was going to say, are there like like statistics and things, of, because a lot of it is so unknown, isn't it? People keep it really private. So what are the statistics for like early pregnancy loss? And
I did actually make a little note of those. So just to give you some ideas, so miscarriage, which is loss in the first 23 weeks of pregnancy, so one in 4 women would have experienced a miscarriage, but actually they think it's probably quite higher than that because there's miscarriages and people don't necessarily report it. So that's an estimated 500 miscarriages a day in the UK.
wow.
Stillbirth, so that's loss after 24 weeks. 1 in 250 pregnancies ends in a stillbirth. So in the UK in 2021, 2,866 babies were stillborn. Abortion, 1 in 3 women have had an abortion.
And I think the latest stats on that was over 250,000 in the UK.
Was that in the last year?
Whenever that last year was, in that year, yeah.
And then neonatal death or newborn death, so death of a baby in the first 28 days of life. In 2021, there was 2.9 deaths per 1,000 live births. So 1,071 babies born after 24 weeks died in the first 28 days of life. So, yeah.
I mean, it just makes you realise, doesn't it, that even within the circles that we mix with socially, like in our different employment, whatever, there's a high chance that we're going to be drawing alongside somebody or unknowingly being a friend to somebody who's gone through such devastating loss, just such a difficult time.
Well, we found that when we've been to networking events, even in like a small event where there's maybe 9 or 10 people in a room and you can be sharing about what you do, there'll be at least 1, 2, 3, 4 people that will either have their own experience or know someone that's had that experience. So,
I mean, no, you go.
I'm thinking we've talked about miscarriages and stillbirth, I guess, more than terminations. So how does it tend to be that people come later on, a few years later or something, to come and talk to you about that?
Yeah, it can be varied actually. It could be straight afterwards or it could be several years after. And I think one of the ladies I saw was 40 years after. She'd had a termination in her 20s and she was now 60-something.
Wow.
And that's a really complicated grief as well because it's a choice that they've made. Often they've been encouraged to make that for different reasons. Either they're too young or they've got no money or their partner's forcing them to or their parents might have forced them to. It could also be for medical reasons, if they've had a termination for, medical abnormalities of the baby. So it's all a hidden grief, but they've made that choice ultimately. But then they think they can't grieve because they've made that choice. So there's a lot of guilt, sometimes a lot of shame. So that gets hidden even longer often because they can't talk about it or they don't feel like they deserve to talk about it. And we say that whenever there's been any kind of pregnancy loss, that's a loss, no matter what the reason or whatever's happened. So they do deserve to grieve. And I guess this podcast is about hope in the city, and it's our privilege, really, that we see people in the depths of despair, whether it's termination or any other loss. And we see there's always a turning point in that counselling journey where, although there's a lot of tears and there's a lot of sobbing and there's a lot of pain that they go through, we always see them turn a corner at some point.
Yeah.
And they're still learning to live with that loss, but they find a way through that, and we do help them to find hope for their futures, don't we? And it's just a privilege to see that, where they start to live again, and their self-esteem is built up, and they can hold their head up high, and it's just amazing to see that when that happens, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a privilege.
Oh, that must be just so special. Just so special. Just wonderful. Yeah. So you've been running for 16 years. So how do you get your funding? How do you run on a very practical level? How do things
It's a bit of a wing and a prayer. So we have to raise all our own funding. We don't get any statutory funding. Right. So we have to put in funding bids, and people do fundraising for us. We do our own fundraising, and that's kept us going for 16 years so far. So yeah.
Yeah, we do an annual quiz event, and we're doing our second ever charity ball next year.
Wonderful.
Which Emma's helping us with.
Well done, Emma.
And then this year, actually, we've done a couple more things. We did a family, like a garden party, which we invited, clients and ex-clients to come and be together. And we have some music and cakes. And that was really good, wasn't it? And we did a coffee and cake morning as well in October, which, again, was a fundraiser, but an opportunity for people to come together.
Yeah. Because I'm sure, having listened to this, there will be people who'll say, that's something that I can see makes a difference in people's lives, that brings hope, and I want to try and get behind it. So if they were interested in helping, how would be the best way to contact you guys?
They could just email into us or give us a phone. Do you want those details? Or
if you're able to.
So the phone number is 01752 246 788, and the email is contact@pregnancycrisiscare.org.uk.
Brilliant. And that's the same if, as well, they if somebody wanted to get in touch with you because they were struggling, or if they felt that you could be helpful to them, or a friend, or they wanted to signpost somebody else, the contact details are the same.
The same, and also on our website there's a contact form that they can fill out, and we're also on Facebook and Instagram, so they can message us that way as well.
Brilliant. And also they can look at the stories as well that people have shared and get more of a feel for the kind of work that you guys do in the city here. I mean, it just sounds amazing, doesn't it? Just to think that we have that, how fortunate we are to have a facility like this in Plymouth, that can meet a need, that can help people who are struggling in just the darkest of situations.
Yeah, definitely.
So
And do you think that when you meet people, do you think that you hear why they haven't come and seen you sooner? What if someone was listening to this and thinking, "Oh, I have thought about something like that, but I'm not sure I'm either bad enough or my situation's bad enough," or like, what would you say to people who are listening, who are sort of umming and ahhing, if you like, or perhaps even just totally written it off in the past as something that they might need?
I'd say, just make that brave first step. It takes a lot of courage, really, and we appreciate that. And we're all very approachable, very friendly, and we don't kind of pounce on people when they come in. We're just very sensitive to what their needs are, and if they feel they can reach out, no need is too small. They just, as long as it's around pregnancy crisis or loss, we can support them for as long as they need, really.
And we can have that initial chat with them on the phone, and although most of our counselling is face to face, we do offer a telephone and Zoom, which sometimes is more manageable for people, or people, maybe prefer that. But we are a friendly bunch.
and just to reiterate as well, there's no charge to the counselling.
No.
People would sign up for, because sometimes that does put people off, doesn't it? They just don't have the facility to be able to pay and to know that that's just available with no charge. It's just incredible.
Yeah. Do they not need to see their GP first then?
No, they can self-refer. We do get GP referrals, but they can self-refer as well.
Wow. And what's the longest that you've sort of journeyed with someone? What does that typically look like? Do you find that you come alongside them for a season? Do you then hear again from them in the future?
Yeah. We used to offer unlimited sessions, but because we got the waiting list now, we've had to cut that down a bit. So we do still offer between 20 and 24 weeks worth of sessions. But we can be flexible with that. And there is one guy that I've seen for a couple of years, actually, because he had the loss of twins in Cornwall. And the inquest has only literally happened a couple of weeks ago, or very recently. So we're rounding down sessions now, but he's been supported over that time because of, the trauma of his loss.
And there was a couple I saw that was probably almost 2 years, and initially it was over COVID, so it was all done by Zoom, and then when restrictions were lifted, which was about a year later, and they were living in Exeter, and then they moved to the area, they came in and had face-to-face sessions, which was lovely to actually meet them in person. But I think when you're supporting people around fertility issues, that can often be longer term, and then they went on to adoption. We're just going through that process now.
Wow.
So obviously not everybody who has a pregnancy crisis is able to come and see you or will come and see you. You've mentioned some of the stats there. It's wide ranging, and obviously many people go through these things and find that actually in community with their family they're able to. Are there any indications that somebody really does need that extra support?
I guess if you're noticing a family or friend who is very withdrawn or becoming more and more depressed, I'd encourage them to come forward.
Because you've mentioned, haven't you, that there's an initial time that in grief that people are they're going to go into it in a particular way that is very normal to those at least early stages. So I guess it's quite difficult to say what is not normal, hey? But equally, we don't want people suffering. There's some stuff is just within the normal.
Yeah.
But I guess there's some stuff that just needs that extra support, and I just wonder what those indications are. As we're looking at our friends and our family, and maybe even looking at ourselves and how long these things have been going on for.
At what point do you then say, I think we need to find some help?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned suicidal. I mean, I'm sure, some of the things that go through our heads as human beings is crazy anyway, isn't it? That's all of us.
Yeah.
I just wonder how much when is too much, we just say, come on.
I guess, suicidal ideation is one thing. Some people stop eating. Some people get, quite mentally unwell. They can't sleep. Or maybe they're very manic and they can't calm down because that's a coping strategy. So, it's just monitoring people's mental health, isn't it? Just keeping an eye on people around you and helping them to reach out either to their GP, or if it's, for pregnancy crisis stuff, they could contact us.
Because you went back to work, didn't you, for a bit, and then found that actually I needed a bit more time off.
Yeah, I think when I went back, it was after about 7 or 8 weeks after James had died, maybe even a little bit less than that. And I think it was my desperation to do something normal, to just try and be normal. And then so I was there for about 6 weeks, and they were amazing. The team in PCC were amazing at looking after me. But my head was completely scrambled, and then I was like, actually, I do not have capacity to do anything more than just get out of bed in the morning. Yeah. So I took more time out. Then for my personal thing is I felt like God was saying, it's time to step back. I need you. We talked about the Psalm 23, didn't we? And just stepping back and,
feeling led back into that.
Yeah. And resting in pastures green and beside still waters, and
had that
and then
time, and then it was a new season.
Yeah, and then it was time to come back, and I was like, because I think there was something about I wanted to be as I was before. I wanted to cling on to the life I had before, but there's in that realization that life isn't going to be what it was before, that you're going to carry that with you, and you may do the things that you did before, but you will experience them in a different way. And I think that was just such a huge learning curve. And I guess for, as you're saying, some of your clients that you see as well, it's that realization that life is never going to be the same again. And how do we live in a new life? How do we live? How do we?
Yeah, and I think that's huge for people because, like you say, there is that kind of desperation just to want to be the person that they were before. And so, often they will go back to work too early, and then, they will struggle with that. But I think, as they kind of work through all these difficult feelings and emotions, obviously you don't get over it, but you adjust and you find whatever is the new normal for you. And, there can be lots of beauty in that as well.
What are some of the things you would say as well that are helpful things to do? So perhaps you've got somebody and they've got a family member and they're in those first early weeks. What kind of things might they be able to do to help themselves or to help that person? Are there some things that you would recommend?
Practical things, I guess. Yeah.
Self-care, I guess, in whatever form that is for them. It could be, sometimes people find it hard to get out of bed. So if that's a celebration, they can get out of bed one morning and have a shower. That's huge. Or maybe just having breakfast or a small meal, or small, if they can't eat big meals, just small regular meals or snacks through the day. Having a bath or a gentle walk around. If they can't go for a jog, maybe they can just go for a walk around the block or around the park. Getting out into nature is really key, just to be able to ground themselves a bit more. We're fortunate to live in a beautiful city, so there's, the moors and the Hoe is, it's lovely places to see, isn't there? Sometimes just lighting a candle. We often think about ways to remember. So, just to have a candle can light up a dark room easily, can't it? And just focusing on something can be really comforting too.
Yeah.
So marking those anniversaries, those moments. You talked in your podcast, didn't you, about inviting grief in on your terms, and actually some of these events and memory time milestones were important to do that.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking about as well, and I know you're a bit of an advocate for this, both of you actually, is the journaling. Journaling your feelings. Sometimes you've just got to get them out and put them somewhere. You never do anything with them, and you may not even feel that you can go back to them, but just to be able to there's something clarifying in it, I think, isn't there?
I think when you feel down, you can't ever really remember what it was like to be up, and when you feel up, you feel almost invincible and can't remember what it was like to sort of scrape yourself along the floor. But actually your journal, even particularly when you read back through them, gives you go, I really felt that bad, but I got through that because I feel like this today, and vice versa. And I think that's helpful to remember that these things do come and go, to remember what things were like, to remember that you were okay once and you will be okay again. I think we keep talking about journaling, don't we? I still need to do it.
But I wonder as well with where we're talking about loss of a baby or whatever as well, because that has been such a short spell of time, hasn't it, for that family, for that time, whether putting pen to paper and even like being able to write about the baby makes it very real. There's something tangible in that, being able to put the name of the child down or the name of the family,
writing
or
a letter of what you would like to say.
It just makes it so tangible and so real, doesn't it? Which
I mean, I remember when Anna was born, just feeling really that I didn't have sort of a relationship with the child. So it was quite obvious to me, like Jess did, like Jess, my wife, like she knew Anna from when Anna was, from the beginning. And I had, for me, perhaps it's part of just emotionally getting ready to being a dad. And in the early days when Anna was born, big part of my role, it felt like, was keeping Jess going because she didn't sleep and the practical things that I needed to do. But as a man, it didn't feel like I really bonded with Anna directly and emotionally until she was a number of months old. So I wonder that there's some really complex things going on then, that if, a baby dies very young, what does that mean for the man who perhaps didn't feel like they had that level of relationship with the child that the mum had? You've talked about the difference between men and women, and I wonder what are some of the other things that have come through from your years of experience taking people through those, men and women.
I mean, we always encourage people, individuals, couples, men and women, to try and find those positive ways to remember the baby that they've lost. But I guess it is a bit more tricky, isn't it, for a man, because they haven't had that physical kind of, that baby growing inside them. But I don't know, what have you come across anything particularly that's helpful with men?
I mean, meeting other men can be useful. There are some sort of I think there was a baby lost football.
Oh, Sands, yes. Yeah.
So meeting other men to, whether they talk or not about their little ones, it's just helpful to have another person that's been through that experience and who understands. I know a couple of guys who've met up and befriended each other almost just to have somebody who cares and understands, and whether they talk a lot or not, they're just there. That can be really useful. Some people make up memory boxes. I guess men and women could do that individually or as a couple. Just some things that could help to focus on their memories. They might look at the scan picture or have write a letter, like Sarah said. I don't know.
What can the journey of recovery look like for people who, we haven't talked about childlessness itself, and the people who have tried for years and years? What are, I guess, first of all, some of the disappointments and challenges, like how that can feel, and what does the journey through and beyond that look like for couples and individuals?
Yeah, it's devastating for people who are desperate for having a child and they can't for whatever reason. And we see those people too, and we see them quite long term. Sometimes they have fertility treatment, sometimes that's successful, sometimes it's not. So yeah, childlessness is a big thing of what we do as well. Yeah. And it is really heartbreaking to see people who would probably be amazing parents and they just can't become pregnant. They're so devastated when we see them, and there is a hopelessness about that. And again, it's like, what is their future going to look like when they've not got the person they want to have in their life, or the opportunity to become a parent? So that's really tricky, and it's navigating another sort of grief journey without an ending, that we don't know what that ending is going to be for them. And so it's trying to find a purpose and a meaning in their life when they've got nothing obvious that would, fulfill that.
It can be, society puts a lot of pressure there as well. There's that expectation, isn't there, that people always want to have children, and some people choose that they don't want to have children, but for those that do want to have children and it doesn't happen, it can be, we do make assumptions, when people get married and when they're together.
It's going to be easy. It's going to, and that's just
when I'm
not
ready,
the
I will be
normal
able
journey.
to. I'll decide and I'll have a baby, and then it doesn't happen, and it's a really difficult.
I mean, we
really
noticed
difficult
when we moved actually from London to here, the difference in ages of parents was so different, and a lot of my friends back in the London area, I think there's more of an assumption, and perhaps it's just the need because of the cost of living, that people need to crack on with their careers and get to their 6-figure salaries as soon as possible, because otherwise who can afford to live in London? So they don't even think about emerge from that career world for relationships until the early 30s. And then from their sort of mid 30s, they then start talking about children. But again, still with this assumption. I think one of the things that's come through from our valuable time together today is, it's the gift of life again, isn't it? It's not guaranteed. We're not entitled to it. It's the preciousness of all of it, both in what we have and what many people have lost, and to have compassion for that and have gratitude for it, and to hold all of those emotions. That it's not a small thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually, when you look at statistics around fertility issues, I think it's 1 in 8, isn't it? Couples will struggle with fertility issues. So.
And again, it's that hidden, isn't it?
Yeah,
because not people don't say, we want to,
people don't
they
talk
might say
about
eventually we'd like to start a family, but they don't place that pressure on themselves. So inadvertently, we're having conversations with people, and we need to be sensitive to those areas, don't we?
Yeah,
and not make
definitely.
assumptions.
Yeah.
But not talk about it, and that comes back to something you said earlier. So you would say, I'm just rubbish at these conversations when they come up. I like to swerve them and move the conversation on to something a bit more chipper. But you would say on the side of, don't know what the opposite of caution is, but with the assumption that they do want to talk about it. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I think so. And I always say to people, like, even if you don't know what to say to someone that's struggling, even if you acknowledge it and say, I don't know what to say to you right now, but it must be really, really difficult. That's giving them some acknowledgement and validation.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Anything else would be a good conversation starter? Can you think about this? I mean, in your opening sessions, what are some of those questions and phrases and your general demeanour?
We're just empathising with them, just saying, I'm really sorry to hear what you've been through. Sounds really tough.
Yeah.
And as glib as that can sound, that is, it's probably not glib. You genuinely mean it. But, but people are not offended when you say that, are
Not
they?
usually, no.
No, people normally, I think when they come to us, are fairly open, aren't they? And just want to be able to talk and have that safe space and, feel, I guess, held in that. They know it's confidential. They know that we're not there to judge them in any way. But, we always make it clear that, it's our job to kind of walk alongside them in what they're going through. And obviously it takes time, doesn't it, to build that relationship. But, people generally open up, I think,
You talked about that in your episode, haven't you? Of, in other episodes of Hope in the City, Emma shared a lot about her faith. And Emma, you've talked about being the visible representation of an invisible God.
Yes.
The God who's with us is being alongside.
Yes. Yeah, being alongside. Well, I can remember actually with both of these ladies meeting up with them after James had died, because they're friends of mine, and we would meet for coffee, and Sarah and I would meet for early morning dog walks with our dogs. And I can remember very early, like in the morning. But also very early in the grief journey. And I can remember walking and not really saying much. And then other times almost just like blurting out on Sarah. And she would just, and didn't offer answers or solutions, or it was just yeah. And same with Jane. I remember meeting with Jane for coffee, and just such tender times of speaking and not speaking, and just sitting with somebody who absolutely felt it with me, Yeah, just amazing. Absolutely amazing. I can only imagine the work that you're doing at Pregnancy Crisis Care, you guys, you and the team, just incredible, absolutely incredible.
And to give people sort of the assurance of what qualifies you guys to do this. You've mentioned that are you counsellors? Is there a particular type of training that's needed? Is there personal experience come into this? What are people's journeys who work for you?
Some people have had personal experience. Other people have just got into counselling training and just become professional counsellors in their own right. And we do have a mixed team of some trainee counsellors and they're all they're all trained counsellors or trainee counsellors on placement with us. So, yeah, it depends. I guess everybody's got a passion for women and men in a crisis situation, so that's what drives us, I guess. And some people have had particular personal experience of loss, and that may be a passion of theirs, and that's why they've got involved.
Lovely. Well, it's been just wonderful having Jane and Sarah join us. Thank you so much for coming in and chatting to us today. It's just been wonderful.
It really has.
It's just, it feels like it's been just very hope-filled, despite hearing that people come to you in the most desperate of circumstances. It's just been so wonderful, and thank you so much for sharing with us.
Would there be anything to sort of give you the mic for the last minute or so? There might not be, but just as you think about the time we've had today, but everything that you've learned over the last 16 years, any sort of parting words of comfort or reassurance or what have you for people who you might not meet in your service but are listening today?
I guess just to encourage people to reach out and talk to someone, even if it's not contacting us. Just make sure that you share whatever you're feeling with somebody that's close to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd add to the fact that your grief is normal. You've been through a lot, and it's the loss of a baby or a child. They say it takes up to a couple of years at least of a minimum of grieving. So to be kind to yourself and to not push yourself and to give yourself time to grieve.
Thank you.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Hope in the City. We hope that you have enjoyed it. If you have, please like and also share, because it might be that somebody else needs to hear this, and it would be helpful to them too. If you would like to interact with us, please contact us via the socials. If there's any subjects, any questions, any issues that you'd like us to discuss, then please do get in touch.
And we have an email address, hope@crplymouth.co.uk. This is our second season, and again, there might be some themes that you would love us to cover, and you might have some questions. We love doing our Q&R sessions as well, so please do get in touch, and bless you.